Tonight I'm going to be reading some short stories from my collection, The Short, the Long and the Tall, which was published towards the end of last year. 34 stories in the collection. A lot of them deal in various guises with my reaction to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the post 9/11 crisis. Others are about some time I spent in Mexico as an undergrad a very long time ago. And a few others don't fit any category. Tonight I'm going to read a little selection of those, hopefully to give a general tone of what the collection consists of. I'm going to start with two that run into each other. They're connected stories. They introduce one of my favorite characters, a man called Carruthers. Carruthers is appearing in various guises, always in an imperial context, and he's a character I'm very fond of. He stems from a photo I saw one time. I was being shown around my boarding school when I was 8. I was about to go to boarding school, and the headmaster presented this photo of this Adonis-like youth, blonde hair, strapping shoulders. He was off to a scholarship to Eton. He was head of school, captain of cricket, captain of rugby. He was the paradigm. And my parents said to me, "Son, be like Carruthers." So I've always had a soft spot for the name, and I've always found it a little funny for whatever reason. I don't know why. So I'll start with a story tonight. The first one I'm going to read is called Apes. We were in the Highlands, surveying for uranium, my first time in the region. We had a few days off for Christmas, and Carruthers wanted to show me some good trout streams. He turned the spit, fat sizzling into the fire. "How is it?" he asked. "Much better than one might expect," I replied. He tore meat from the leg. "Unlikely to be a market for it back home, but it is usually quite good." We shot the chimp just before sunset. We'd been watching them through the trees. They were agitated, screaming, shaking branches. "Incredible," Carruthers muttered. "I've only seen it a couple of times before. They're trapping colobus monkeys." He passed me the binoculars. "See for yourself." I scanned the foliage, focusing on a large male high in the canopy. He cornered a monkey. The monkey bared its teeth, snarling, but it was no use. The chimp seized it by the neck, killing it instantly. Then it ravaged the nest, throwing babies to the ground. Younger chimps grabbed the corpses. The big male descended the tree, dropping onto the leaves. He tore the colobus to pieces. "We'll have to mention it when we get back," said Carruthers. "You know, I don't think anyone's officially recorded such behavior. They're supposed to be vegetarian." "Yes," I agreed. "Everyone thinks they're friendly." Carruthers let out a shout of laughter. "I remember in the Congo, they used to put prisoners in a cage with a male chimp. A few minutes later, there wasn't much left of the poor fellow. First thing you do is rip off the testicles." "Come on, let's catch supper," he whispered. "Make them wonder who's in charge. Develop their brains." He aimed, shooting the head off a young male. "Nice shot," I said. The troop ran away screaming. He patted the 303. "I've sometimes thought that's the way it is. I mean, here we are, wandering about in tune with our lives, or so we think, but we're in the crosshairs. Just a matter of time." He pointed to the sky. "I've never really thought about it quite like that," I replied. After gutting the chimp, Carruthers prepared the fire while I set up the tent. The darkness came quickly. It was never really light in the jungle. Soon, the flames were high enough to cook, the intestines crackling across the wood. We didn't bother skinning the creature. There was very little fat. The fire burned away the hair, the smell of roasting meat making my mouth water. We sat gnawing the flesh with yam and onions in a soup. We could hear the Civil War across the border, the pop of mortars. "There they go again," said Carruthers, "right on time." So the second story leads in from that. We have our two characters enjoying their chimp and having a little chat about an old friend. So I'll now read The Governor. I lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply. "Reminds me," Carruthers continued, "do you remember Mike Carter? He was at Impal." He motioned. "By the way, do have a drop." I poured from the flask, sipping Glenlivet. I recalled a lean undergraduate with white hair. He'd been studying for the church until he lost his faith. He suffered a nervous breakdown. Then along came the war. "You mean Mad Mike Carter? He was a Trinity scholar." Carruthers nodded. "The same fellow. I met him in Burma. He was one of the few people Wingate listened to." "What of him?" I asked. "I've often wondered." Carruthers chuckled, stoking the embers. "He always loathed monkeys, said they reminded him too much of himself. After the war, he couldn't handle peacetime at all. His drinking became a problem, and he was thrown out of the army for fighting. I love fighting. Carruthers smiled. He punched the general. The Colonial Office rescued him, and he sent him to the southeast during the Civil War because he knew the territory after his activities with the resistance. Actually, they were jolly glad to be rid of him, and no one else would go. He was always rather odd, I interrupted, an eccentric one could say. Carruthers nodded. Wow, Carter thrived. He became increasingly popular. He spoke the languages, settled all sorts of disputes. Carter returned, the words spreading like a mantra. He travelled in a silver cloud. The natives had never seen anything like it. Soon, it seems, they were murmuring Kurt-ah. Kurt-ah? I asked. Carruthers frowned. Oh, Kurt-ah's a deity, a monkey god. He appears in troubled times. In the temples, he's always carved from the finest ivory, the whiter the better. He's the moon, dancing with the sun, rolling the earth to the new dawn. So, Carter became a primate of sorts, I observed. Carruthers grinned, spitting out gristle. Precisely. Some say he knew all along what he was doing. Others disagree. All the tribes revere Kurt-ah. The shamans predicted he would reappear because of the Celts. And to cap it all, they found out Mike was born in the year of the monkey. The war fizzled out. He was the obvious choice for governor. The crown lets him get on with it. The region's completely settled down. Indeed, it's prospering. I gazed at the flames, the remains of the chimp smouldering. Almost enough to make one believe. Peculiar how these things happen. Carruthers gestured. More? No, no thank you, I replied. I think this part was a little underdone. He leaned over. Here, let me turn it again for you. I handed him the meat. In the distance, bombing thumped through the valley. Then I realized it was thunder. Storm, said Carruthers. Yes, I agreed. We'd better take cover. So that's the end of the first couple of that. I'm going to finish on. Do I have time? It's, okay.
10 minutes.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to read one now that's very different in a way. It is set towards the end of World War II in Paris, and events at dinner lead to a rather peculiar situation. So I'll now read Art for Art's Sake, Money for God's Sake. VE Day 1945. I think it was Jimmy's idea to go to Maxime's. We were in Paris, we were Americans, we liberated Europe. Victory was ours. Come on, let's go live it up, he said. We deserve it. So we went, 12 of us. We'd all been in the front line at some point covering stories. We were alive. We needed to celebrate. There was a rumor Hemingway might show up. I was pretty new, so I just followed. I was very keen to meet Hemingway. The rest of them were a bunch of hacks I didn't recognize, and a couple of art critics. So we were getting into the meal, everyone talking at once. I started with escargot, then roast duck. The bottles kept coming. Soon we were all drunk, and people started telling jokes. Hey, listen to this one, yelled Jimmy. Which artist has dirty fingers? Why don't you shut it? Someone yelled back. You got a big mouth, Jimbo. Everyone jocular, no malice. No, seriously, sir, Jimmy. Which artist has dirty fingers? No one was listening, so Jimmy stood up and yelled, Picasso! There was a moment's silence, then we were on the floor like it was the funniest thing we'd ever heard. The meal went on like this for about 3 hours, by which time everyone had put away at least 2 bottles of wine. We were toasting dead colleagues, singing songs. A couple of the guys had fallen asleep. I was sitting back, nursing a glass of cognac, smoking a big Havana, thinking of the good life. The war over, and we could go home. New era, new world. It was hard to believe. Someone called for the check. The head waiter arrived, very correct, very respectful. We thanked him. Someone hollered, Vive la France, and started singing the Marseillaise, the only one amongst us who knew any proper French, aside from asking for wine or a girl. The check did the rounds. No one seemed anxious to pull out their wallet. When Jimmy saw it, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He handed it to me without a word. I did the math, recounted, repeated the process, checked the conversion, allowed for zeros. No mistake, $600. More than my life savings. I didn't even have $2 on me. I'm clean out, whispered Jimmy. It turned out we had $20 between us. Everyone thought someone else was going to pay, or else it was on the house because we were Americans and we'd won the war. When the head waiter found out he was no longer respectful and correct, an argument ensued, negotiations about washing up all night, calling the police. A couple of waiters entered the fray. Things were getting nasty. Then, to cap it all, one of the waiters made a remark about how this would never have happened when the Germans were there. The Germans always paid on the spot. They paid better than the Americans. A scuffle started. One of the guys took a swing at the waiter, who swung back. Other guys trying to break it up, getting into a mix-up themselves. Some military police arrived, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers. Things settled down. Everyone straightened their jackets and ties while we parleyed what to do. I saw a stocky little guy with dark hair talking to the head waiter. I vaguely noticed him and the broad he was with. No one else paid him any attention, but they'd been watching us. They were at a table in the far corner, the woman dark and very beautiful like a gypsy. The head waiter listened, nodded, and he gave the little guy a menu. The little guy scribbled something on the card and returned it to the head waiter. The head waiter studied it and he strolled over to our table, a big smile on his face. "Gentlemen," he enunciated, "the bill is taken care of. You may now leave. Knowing your predicament, Pablo Picasso has produced a drawing for Maxine's in lieu of your payment. He wishes you his warmest compliments." In the subsequent chaos, I looked at the drawing briefly before it was whisked away. First, I saw eyebrows and a nose, but when I looked a second time, I perceived a pair of buttocks and a pen. All right.